from Iran. The representative from Panama currently just speaking. But let's bring in now Sir Richard Dalton, former UK ambassador to Iran. Sir Richard, thank you for making the time to speak to us this evening. As you will understand, we do want to hear from the Iranians when they do speak in the Security Council. If that happens while you and I are talking, we'll have to step away. So my apologies in advance if that does happen. You know the Iranians, Sir Richard. What do you think their reaction will be to Trump's strikes overnight?
Well, they certainly won't take the advice of the British and the French, who are asking the Iranians to do things which the British and the French themselves would never do, namely go back to negotiations immediately after having been attacked by two nuclear powers, having been humiliated, having had immense damage done to them. The Iranians have already made plain that they will respond at a time of their own choosing, and we don't know where or when that will be. But it really is quite something to hear all these calls for de-escalation immediately after this operation by the United States. My own belief is that we are in for quite a long period of no peace and no war. Why Iran now should de-escalate while Israel has made plain through its Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, that it will continue to attack Iran, I don't know.
So, look, the UK, as we heard from Dame Barbara Woodward there, has called for restraint. A similar call from the French, of course, as part of the E3 plus the UK. And just on Prime Minister Netanyahu, he has said today, he's given a news conference, we won't pursue our actions beyond what is needed to achieve them, but we also won't finish too soon. They seem to be sort of rhetorically stepping back from this regime change talk that we heard a few days ago, Sir Richard. So there is perhaps potentially an off-ramp if the Iranians were willing to accept it?
Well, diplomacy was wrecked before it had a chance to get going by President Trump's preparations, while at the same time allegedly allowing time for diplomacy. And not providing any flexibility whatsoever in his position for the Europeans in their discussions with Araqchi to play with. I think it's quite absurd to hear this American triumphalism. They are declaring an overwhelming success before they've completed even their own damage assessments. And here we've just heard your Washington correspondent say that the IAEA has got a vital role in informing the Americans just what they've done. So everybody needs to cool down a bit and stand back. And there's also another point, which is that, of course, these attacks have made the IAEA's job infinitely harder, not only because of Iran's potential withdrawal from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and potential withdrawal of cooperation with IAEA inspectors, but also because, as Iranian officials have told us, a good deal of their sensitive materials and probably their equipment had been removed before these attacks. The fact that there has been no or negligible human casualties in these overwhelmingly powerful attacks, according to Mr. Trump, suggests that the sites had been evacuated. And of course, everybody knows that you can't bomb the knowledge and of how to enrich uranium for civil purposes out of the heads of people. So the chances of Iran agreeing instantaneously, as apparently demanded, to drop its entire civil enrichment program look low to me at present, short of some much more imaginative and creative diplomacy than we've seen so far.
Yeah, the assessment damage is still being done, isn't it, Sir Richard? Iran's Atomic Energy Agency has said this evening that the nuclear sites are quickly being rebuilt. Activity will continue with greater power. That's according to Iranian media. And, Sir Richard, your first answer used a word that I want to pick up on, humiliated. The Iranians have been humiliated by this response. Can we take from that that there may well be a reaction from the Iranians that goes above what may well be expected if they have moved nuclear material to somewhere else? Could there be an even stronger reaction coming from the Iranians? Is that the fear?
Yes, numerous analysts, not just me, believe that these American strikes coming on top of Israel's strikes have made the chances of Iran ultimately withdrawing from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty rather higher
So, Richard, why is it that Iran had enriched its uranium to 60%, to very close to being able to turn it into weapons grade and weaponize it?
Well, clearly it shouldn't have. It's a move which was highly provocative and has been seized upon as an excuse, I believe an illegitimate excuse to attack Iran, because there was no evidence of an imminent threat of weaponization or imminent possession of a nuclear weapon. And there was certainly no Iranian plan underway to eliminate the state of Israel, which Iran knows perfectly well it's unable to do. But you have to look at the context for this bad decision of Iran to enrich to 60%, which is that America withdrew from an agreement which was working. That came against the background of the failure of the Western countries, the UK included, to honor their side of the bargain with Iran in the JCPOA agreement of 2015, because we were never able to trade normally with Iran or provide normal financial facilities, as was promised in that agreement. Then, after Trump had destroyed the agreement in 2018, Iran waited a year before doing anything beyond the terms of the JCPOA in the hope that the Europeans could draw the Americans back in, but they failed. And then after 2019, with ever mounting economic sanctions against them and ever greater impoverishment of their people, Iranians decided to try and get back into negotiations by increasing the leverage on their negotiating partners, Russia, China, the United States, the other countries, by showing that it had the capacity to enrich in a dangerous manner. That's the basis for their decision, to do something which was highly dangerous.
Yes, and highly dangerous as well, as you pointed out in your answer there, is that the regime in Iran has called publicly and consistently for the destruction of the state of Israel. I mean, that's an obscene thing for them to want to happen.
It is.
I'm glad we can agree on that, at least. Look, going back to that idea of them being humiliated, the rhetorical efforts by the Iranians at the moment to kind of hold on to a position where they still feel as if they have some kind of strength, some kind of agency within this. But as we've seen for the past few days, with their missile sites being struck and with perhaps a lessening in the number of missiles being fired into Israel, can the Iranian state itself respond adequately, or is it going to be on proxies, do you think, to do it for them, who have already said that they will strike at perhaps US assets in the region?
The range of options mentioned by United States analysts include action by the movement in other Middle East countries that Iran has supported. It also includes attempts against American institutions or American people outside the Middle East. It also includes blocking of the Straits of Hormuz, which the Iranian parliament has already voted for. And it also includes, as I've said, withdrawal from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and an eventual move, it's called sneak out, under which you throw out the IAEA inspection regime or keep it in such a minimal level that it's unable to do its job. Now, my own belief is that we won't see any early definitive decisions, that we may be in a position of no peace, no war for some time.
So, Richard, let me get a bit more of your analysis on the Straits of Hormuz. As you rightly point out, of course, the parliament in Iran have voted for it. I think it now goes to sort of the military council to decide whether or not they will do that. Will they, do you think? I mean, what's your sense of it? And if they do, what's the sort of global fallout to that?
The decision is for Iran's Supreme National Security Council, which reports to the Supreme Leader. So ultimately, the decision would be the Supreme Leader's. And hitherto, the Iranians have always said, either everybody uses the Straits of Hormuz or nobody. And it, of course, would blow back on them if they were unable to export their oil. The Straits of Hormuz carry about 20% of the world's oil. In addition to that, very substantial quantities of natural gas. Some American analysts say that if it were blocked, the result would be a spike in the oil price from 77 or so, where it is now, towards $130 a barrel. that is distinctly possible if the markets got the impression that the closure of the straits was going to last a long time. Now, that is the big uncertainty, because you can take action which would drive up insurance rates or ultimately decide tanker owners not to risk their craft in the Straits of Hormuz by attacking a sufficient number of vessels. But that in return would provoke a response from the United States and other navies which are in the area. And it could lead to a resumption of the bombing of Iran. So it's, again, nothing is cost-free for Iran. There's no retaliation which they can mount, which is somehow going to deliver them a big dividend quickly and sustainably. My expectation is that the Supreme Leader will require something substantial at a time of his own choosing, and we may have some time to wait.
So, Richard, would you give us 30 seconds, please, just on your thoughts of what the UK should do if Iran were to strike at US bases? Of course, the UK government is calling for restraint, for de-escalation, but if an ally is attacked, what should the UK do?
Well, the UK should not become a belligerent in a fight which is not its own. I mean, one of the unrealistic things about this debate in the Security Council is that nobody is calling upon Israel to show restraint and escalation, and nobody is responding to Iran's legitimate request for the Council to take a position on the illegality of the aggression in the light of the various chapters of the Charter of the United Nations quoted so eloquently by the representative of Sierra Leone. This was not a legitimate action in self-defense by Israel. But of course, that's too difficult for countries like Britain and France to raise. And that's one of the reasons why this debate is unlikely to have much impact on the course of events.
OK, Sir Richard Dalton, former UK ambassador to Iran. Appreciate your time this evening, Sir Richard. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
All right, of course, we're going to keep across the activity in the UN Security Council. We are waiting.